So let's talk about contracts. When you're about to sign one, you probably read every single line, right? I mean, you're trying to catch every detail. But what if I told you that what's actually written down on the page is really only half the story? That there are rules in that agreement that are legally binding, but you'll never, ever see them in print.
It seems like a simple question, doesn't it? Are contracts just what's written down? Well, the answer is a big, resounding no. We all think of contracts as these solid, sealed documents where everything is spelled out. But you know what? The law sees things a little differently, and that little difference is exactly what we're going to dive into today.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The best way to think about it is like this. Almost every contract is written with some invisible ink. There are terms, duties, and obligations hiding right there between the lines, shaping the whole agreement without you even knowing. And these aren't some sneaky loopholes, not at all. They're actually a crucial part of how contracts are supposed to work.
Now, this invisible ink, it has a proper legal name, of course. They're called implied terms, and in this explainer, we're going to decode them. We're going to figure out what they are, where on earth they come from, and most importantly, why they matter so much to you.
Okay, so here's the big idea in a nutshell. An implied term is basically a rule that a court will treat as part of your contract even if you never wrote it down, even if you never talked about it. Heck, you might have never even thought about it. But make no mistake, these terms are just as powerful and just as enforceable as any of the words you can actually see on that page.
So, you're probably asking, where does all this invisible ink come from? It's not just made up on the spot. These unwritten rules really come from three main places. First, from the way things are normally done in a specific industry. Second, they can come directly from the law itself. And third, they can come from judges making decisions in court. Let's break each one down.
All right, first up, rules from the trade. These are terms that get woven into a contract simply because they reflect the standard, accepted way of doing business in a certain field. You could call it the unwritten code of conduct.
The thinking behind this is pretty straightforward. When two people in the same industry make a deal, the law assumes they're playing by the same unwritten rules as everyone else in their profession. The custom is just so well known, so common, that it's just a given. It doesn't even need to be said.
Let's get practical with an example. Say you hire a software developer. Your contract probably doesn't say you must write clean functional code. It just wouldn't. But the law will automatically imply a term that the developer has to do the job with reasonable skill and care. Why? Because that is the standard in the tech world. It's an unwritten expectation that becomes a totally binding obligation. Pretty cool, right? Okay, next up, it's not just industry standards that write in invisible ink. Sometimes, the government itself steps in and adds terms into certain contracts for everybody. This happens when the people who make laws, legislators, decide that certain protections are so important they need to be a part of certain contracts automatically. It doesn't matter if the people signing agree to it or not. You can think of them as built-in safety nets, especially for regular consumers like you and me. Here's a perfect real-world example. Renting an apartment. Your lease probably doesn't have a clause that says the landlord must make sure you have hot water and that the roof doesn't leak. But in a lot of places, local laws automatically add something called a warranty of habitability to every single lease. That becomes an unwritten, legally binding duty for the landlord to keep the place safe and livable. And that brings us to our third and final source, which is, I think, the most fascinating one. The courts themselves. Sometimes judges will actually add terms to a contract to make sure it's fair, or just to make it work the way everyone intended in the first place. Really, this is all about filling in the gaps. If a contract is totally silent on a really important point, and because of that it becomes unworkable or just plain unfair, a court can step in. They can add a term that reflects what the parties must have intended for the deal to make any sense. It's all about fairness and just basic business logic.
For example, think about a business partnership agreement. It might not have a line in it that says partners shouldn't try to cheat each other. It sounds obvious, but a court will almost always imply a duty of good faith. This creates a legally enforceable, unwritten obligation for all partners to act honestly and not secretly sabotage the partnership.
Okay, so we've covered the three big sources for these unwritten rules. Let's pull it all together now and see how these different kinds of invisible ink really work.
So, just to recap, these hidden rules come from three different places. You've got trade custom, which is all about industry standards, like the basic expectation that a baker will sell you a cake that's, safe to eat. Then you have statutes or laws, which give us mandatory protections, like the rule that things you buy should actually work for their intended purpose. And finally, you have the courts, which give us these fundamental ideas of fairness, like the duty for both sides of a contract to actually cooperate and try to make it work. So what's the big takeaway here? It's this: a contract is never just a piece of paper. It's a living agreement that's shaped by industry norms, legal safety nets, and basic principles of fairness. The text you see on the page, that's just the beginning. And understanding that is absolutely key to knowing what you're really agreeing to.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The next time you look at any contract, maybe it's a new job offer, a lease for an apartment, or even just the terms and conditions for a new app, remember to think about what isn't written down. What unwritten rules of custom, of law, or of basic fairness are silently shaping that agreement right in front of you?